Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. One moment and we'll begin. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. عفوا. نعم. لا ستة بكرة إن شاء الله. طيب يا مشايخ. Going over my notes here. See exactly where we left off. Does anybody remember exactly?
I have it noted, Sheikhna, but I'm
Sorry, the headphones are far away here. Say it again.
I have it noted, but I'm not in front of my computer, but I'm heading there right now.
Okay, so you're opening it right now?
No, inshallah. So if you don't have it, I can.
Yeah, please do, just so I can double check, because I have it at باب الغسل وحكم الجنب, but I would like to make sure.
I think that sounds right, because the last thing we did was related to wudu, Wallahu alam, or najasat.
No.
Right. No, I think it was wudu, right?
Oh.
Bismillah.
So the problem is that my book is filled with notes, so I'm trying to find it between everything. I'd moved some Word documents off to a folder, and interesting enough, I can't find the folder right now.
Okay, I may not have noted the last time, because I think maybe I wasn't home when the dars that was held, because here I have Al-Aniya, and we definitely finished Al-Aniya and went past it.
Let me just do it another way then, real quick, just so we can pick up exactly where we left off. Bismillah. Okay, so I checked the previous class audio, and it seems that we were at wudu.
No, we were definitely in wudu somewhere.
No, and it seems that we ended by speaking about mash al-ra's. So we'll begin from Hadith 34 in some of the copies, which is قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا استيقظ أحدكم من منامه فليستنثر ثلاثا فإن الشيطان يبيت على خيشومه متفق عليه إن شاء الله تعالى. So that's where we're going to be picking up from بإذن الله. Does anybody have any questions before we begin? طيب, let's go ahead and begin بإذن الله. طيب, so the hadith here begins with, or the hadith that we're beginning with this evening, inshallah ta'ala, is from Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. The following is also from Abi Hurairah, and the wording is slightly different. In the first one, let's review it carefully. إِذَا اسْتَيْقَظَ أَحَدُكُمْ مِنْ مَنَامِهِ. The other one says, إِذَا اسْتَيْقَظَ أَحَدُكُمْ مِنْ نَوْمِهِ. Now, the differences between manamihi and nawmihi are very minor linguistically. However, with that being said, some might argue, and we'll show examples later on for that, inshallah ta'ala, that manamihi would actually have a different understanding than nawmih, because the nawm, Jamil, would be referring to sleeping at night, while the manam might actually be any sleep. This mas'ala brings us to another issue altogether, and that is, we know that the ulama have stated that there's washing of the hands in the beginning of wudu. Tamam? The ulama present this hadith as evidence. If one wakes up, they should wash their hands or not put their hands into the container 3 times. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ in the other narration. And in the previous narration, it says فَلْيَسْتَنْتِرْ ثَلَاثًا, which is cleaning out the nose. They're both causing problems. Why? Because if you consider these acts as sunnah and connect them back to wudu, then is washing the hands only tied to wudu if you're waking up? And with that same understanding, can we also say, extend that to istinshaq? And if we do extend it to istinshaq, can we extend it to madmada as well? Some of the madahib actually answered this problem by saying what? The madmada and istinshaq is wajib. Tamam? The Jumhur said no. This hadith proves that neither are wajib. Neither are wajib. But is the sleep here a qaid? This is the issue. Is sleep the impacting factor? In other words, what we're trying to get at here, when I come to wudu, if I wasn't asleep, can I skip washing the hands and washing the mouth and nose? You might say, this opinion sounds insane. Let me read something to you that will make you rethink that. 1 second. So I'm picking up right now Al-Imam al-Shirazi's Al-Muhadhab. And we're going to go right to wudu. So we'll slip through until we get to Sifatul Wudu, inshallah. He says, no, let's get right to the beginning. I think that's where here we go. Oh no, actually, that's the fard of ghasl yadayn. We need to get to the sunnah. He says, faslun fi ghasl al-kaffayn. And some say that he didn't say it in the original manuscript, but I saw it in one, so there's uncertainty there. He says, ثم يغسل كفيه ثلاثا لأن عثمان وعلي كرم الله وجههما وصف وضوء رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فغسل اليد ثلاثا. Both Uthman and Ali رضي الله تعالى عنهم وكرم الله وجههما, they described the wudu of the Prophet ﷺ and they spoke about washing the hand 3 times. Here's the part that will make you ponder now for a moment. He said, ثُمَّ يَنْظُرُ. Then the person would observe. If they did not wake up, then they have a choice. They can dip their hands into a container, then wash. And if they don't want to do that, then they just pour water outside of the container. And then after they rinse their hands, they can dip their hands in the container. But if he did wake up, he should not put his hands, فالمستحب, it's disliked, that he puts his hands into the water until he washes it 3 times, and he mentions the hadith. What happened here is Al-Imam al-Shirazi is basing the whole entire discussion based upon the sleeping. He's looking at an-nawm as a qaid. Our ashab in the Shafi'i school said, no, this is not what's meant. The sleeping here is not a factor. It's an example. If you're uncertain of the status of your hands, then it's disliked for you to put your hands in a bucket of water and then make wudu from it. Okay, well, is washing of the hands, is that a sunnah or no? It is a sunnah, whether you have a bucket or not. But then what if the hands are clean? What if the hands are clean? There is a madhab. Some even argued that it was attributed to Al-Hasan al-Basri that said, you don't have to wash the hands altogether. So somebody said to Al-Hasan al-Basri, according to what is attributed, there's an argument on its authenticity to them. So somebody said, well, Ya Hassan, what if the hands are dirty? He said, don't worry about it. The hands are fine. The water is not going to be dirty. And Imam al-Nawawi quotes some of this that is attributed to Al-Hasan al-Basri in al-Majmu', and he says, كل هذا ضعيف. كل هذا ضعيف. And it's obvious that it's ضعيف. But what's the point? Like, why wash the hands? Why blow out the nose after you wake up? Well, in the hadith of blowing the nose, the Prophet ﷺ says what? الشيطان يبيت على خيشومه. الشيطان يبيت على خيشومه. The ulama, they discuss what is the reality of what this means. Now, this really takes us beyond the scope of fiqh, which is something normally I don't like to do, but we'll mention it for the benefit. The ulama mentioned 2 opinions on this matter. One opinion, because what does the statement actually mean in English so we can understand it, is that the shaitan sleeps upon the nose of the believer. Some scholars said this could be taken literal, and therefore he makes the nose filthy, or he might, so we blow out our nose. Other ulama said, no. What it means is that this is metaphorical, meaning you don't know what you could be inhaling when you're asleep, dirt, debris. So the Prophet ﷺ is teaching you a better way of cleaning yourself. So you blow your nose. Tamam. This is how the ulama took it. And Al-Qadi Iyad in Al-Shafa, he spoke a lot about this hadith and what it could possibly mean. So if you want to expand more on that, you can do so. But now here comes a question. Are these 2 acts part of wudu or separate? Well, if you say no is not a qaid, meaning it's not a restriction to your understanding, then no, it's not limited to one thing or the other. You do it in wudu, and that's that. But what about when you sleep? The ulama, they said, well, yes, we recognize that sleep here is an example. You could still act upon it, meaning you could still say that when you wake up, even if you're not making wudu, you're to rinse your hands and blow your nose. Why? Because even though a known here is not a qaid, it's a stated example. We ought to fulfill it. Kalam Jamil. Ibn Hazm and others, they argued and said, no, this is not an example. This is a qaid. No, this has nothing to do with wudu. This is wajib when you wake up. Well, on what basis? How can you reject this? Remember, al-amru lil-wujub. We know this, right? This is the qa'ida usuliyya. If there's a command in the sharia, then it's wajib unless what? Proven otherwise. So, do you have something else? You don't. You don't have another nas. But you have something else. And that's al-ijma'. Al-ijma' that these things for a person that woke up are not wajib. They're not wajib. Realistically, only Ibn Hazm made the wujub claim. So when someone comes and tells you al-amru al-wujub and there's no nas saying otherwise, tell them that ijma' counts. Ijma' counts. تمام؟ طيب. Our next hadith عن لقيط بن صبرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أسبغ الوضوء أسبغ الوضوء وخلل بين الأصابع وبالغ في الاستنشاق إلا أن تكون صائما أخرجه الأربعة وصححه ابن خزيمة ولأبي داود في رواية إذا توضأت فمضمض meaning إذا توضأت فمضمض وبالغ في الاستنشاق إلا أن تكون صائما. This is the mas'ala of sunan al-wudu. The first thing he says is asbigh al-wudu. Now, Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he also has a narration of asbigh al-wudu. However, this is very important to keep in mind. Abi Hurairah did not hear the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam say asbigh or asbigh al-wudu. No, he heard other nusus and deducted from those nusus asbigh al-wudu. This is why Ibn Hajar did not mention the hadith from Abi Hurairah on this matter here. Kalam Jamil, because it wouldn't make sense. Because there's no sama'. Here you have Laqit actually heard this. So it's better. Does it matter? It does. If you can't prove that the Prophet ﷺ said it, that would be a problem. Tamam? طيب. There's a reason, a story behind this incident. The story goes as follows. Laqit says, we visited the Prophet ﷺ. We didn't find the Prophet ﷺ. We found Aisha al-Mu'mineen radiallahu ta'ala anha. So she brought food and things. Then when the Prophet ﷺ came, he said, should I get you any food? Did anyone get you any food? They said, yes, we ate. Then a man came to the Prophet ﷺ. He was speaking about animals, his herd. They agreed that they were going to slaughter something. إلى آخره كلام جميل. Then someone asked the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, how do I make wudu? Tell me about the wudu. And you could tell from, because it's a long, very long hadith, that the men already knew about wudu. But earlier in the discussion, there were arguments. Not arguments, against Prophet, but questions and discussions. Laqit complaining. Not Laqit, afwan. There was someone there that was complaining about his wife, and Prophet ﷺ said, well, why don't you do this? He said, no. Why don't you do that? The man said, no. He said, fine, divorce her. He said, no, we have children. So the Prophet ﷺ said, fine, just give her advice and just let it go. Inshallah, if it's khair, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen. If not, khalas. He said basically, khalas, don't overthink it. And then he said, don't treat your wife like you would treat your slave. Kalam Jameel. Basically, he's telling him, like, don't hit her, don't discipline her, because it's still your wife, it's your spouse. Kalam Jameel. So then the man, out of the blue, according to the narration, flips to the wudu issue. So evidently he's Muslim. He knows about ibadah. Kalam Jameel. But it's as if he's asking about more. Tamam. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Asbigh al-wudu. The word asbigh, it means to perfect. It means to perfect. يعني إيش perfect? يعني complete. But what does it mean? And is this sunnah or is this fard? Well, interesting. The ulama, they actually break isbagh down to two segments. And the reason why is that he said asbigh. That's fi'l amr. If there was an usuli present, he would say that's it, wajib. But is isbagh actually wajib? No. But this isbagh is, or better yet, it contains wujub. How? If you're supposed to be washing your arm in wudu and you wash halfway, technically this is called what? Washing the arm. And there's a qa'idah in usul in the Shafi'i school. It's called al-aghdhu bi-aqalli ma qeel. Meaning, if you do the bare minimum of what you were commanded to do, then that is suffice. Then that is suffice. This hadith breaks that rule for the arm, for the limbs of wudu. By him saying asbigh, he means not here, you cannot take aqall ma qeel. What does this mean? This means you need to fulfill it to the end, meaning you have to wash up until what constitutes the arm, which would be up into the elbow and then slightly above it, so that way you've washed the entirety of the arm. So from the tips of the fingers to above the elbow line. That amount of isbagh is wajib. That still isbagh. Tamam? That's still what? Isbagh. Because the understanding the dalala of the term asbagh is itmam al-amali ila al-matlub. That means washing the full face. That means washing the full arm. That means washing the full foot. What about wiping the entirety of the head? Oh, you see, those that say wiping the entirety of the head, they said, well, this would be understood from this hadith. We said, no, this is am. This is am. But there's a khas that would do takhsis to this am. In what amount? There's khilaf there because there's nothing precise there. So Imam Shafi'i said some of. Abu Hanifa said a quarter of. Imam Malik didn't agree that that would be takhsis. He didn't. So he said you had to wipe what? The entirety of the head. See how that came together? That's how that process took place. And anyone else that said you have to wipe the entirety of the head once, they're taking it from this and they're rejecting the takhsis there. Okay, from a hadith perspective, how can you reject the hadith, the takhsis there? What's the takhsis? What's the other hadith? The Prophet ﷺ was wearing a turban. He pushed it back and wiped a part of the front of his head, right? وَأَتَمَّ الْمَسْحَ عَلَى عِمَامَتِهِ. They say it's a rukhsa. If they don't reject that, if they accept the hadith, then they'll have to answer for it. So they'll say it's a rukhsa. That he wiped on the imama, right? خلاص. Rukhsa, like al-masah al-khufayn. We say that's still problematic. Because if the foot is half out, you can't masah al-khufayn. So how can part of the head be out? That's how we in the Shafi'i school would respond. Tamam? Then he said, وَخَلِّلْ بَيْنَ الْأَصَابِعِ. Here's a problem. No one ever said that التخليل بين الأصابع أصابع اليدين الرجلين that it's fard. Well, hold on for a minute. If the hadith is starting with فعل أمر, right? أسبغ. Then he says وخلل. What do you think وخلل is? It's not going to be فعل مضارع or فعل ماضي. It's فعل أمر. Wait a minute. Is there an amount of the word وخلل here that's أمر? Yes. Yes. What is it? Water needs to get in between your fingers and in between your toes. That portion, that extent is what is wajib. There's no khilaf there. Then is the takhleel process itself, is it wajib? No. Then what is it then? It is ziyadatun ala al-maqsood. Remember when we said asbigh contains two aspects, a fard and a sunnah, or wajib and a sunnah? The same thing with khallil. Because as long as you get the water in between your fingers and toes, you're good. That would actually be part of takhleel. Because what's the idea of khallil? إيصال الماء بين الأصابع. Well, if the water is already there, then that technically is a form of takhleel. But what is the takhleel in origin? It's actually putting your fingers in between your fingers and your fingers in between your toes. So if you're uncertain that the water has gotten there or not, then what? Then you do it. Then he says, وَبَالِغْ فِي الْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ. يعني increase your inhaling of the water. Same thing in the madmada. Same thing and the madmada, because they go hand in hand. And I'll discuss the complete scenarios, inshallah, in our next class of the madmada and istinshaq, because there's around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 9 to 12 different ways it could go. And I'll explain them all in detail, inshallah, with their adillah. Tamam. The mubalagha is wajib. It is wajib. It's wajib. But to what extent? Just make sure you get water in there. This takes us to pondering for a moment upon what does the term madmada mean and constitute, and what does istinshaq mean and constitute. The madmada, its bare minimum, and what constitutes madmada is taking literally maybe a teaspoon amount of water in your mouth and spitting it back out again. That's why they say وَأَقَلُّهُ مَجَّةٌ. وَأَقَلُّهُ مَجَّةٌ. تمام. And istinshaq أقله إدخال الماء إلى الأنف. That's the bare minimum. إدخال الماء إلى الأنف. How can you do mubalagha? Do a little bit more. Do a little bit more. Is a little bit more wajib? Here's a lot of debate amongst the ulama. Some have argued that there's ijma' that the mubalagha concept itself is only mustahab based upon ijma'. Tamam. Well, some argued, well, in that case, then the takhleel can also be labeled as mustahab because there's no ijma' that you have that it is wajib. They said no, the asl. Well, then what about the isbagh? Well, we said that the isbagh has two understandings from it: actually completing and then going a little extra to perfect it. In short, we can summarize this hadith, and this is a very important hadith, and the ulama speak about it in the books of fiqh, in the sunan. And sometimes they'll even go into extra depth and detail about it to make sure that you do it right. But in summary, you need to fulfill these acts to the best of your ability without any time constraints. Tamam? Going beyond that is always good and accepted and sought after by our ulama. And the ulama throughout the ages have written so many books and papers in regards to sunan al-wudu. So this is something very important to the ulama. Lastly, he said, إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ صَائِمًا. Now, this is an obvious one, because anything that goes through the jawf or into the jawf through the natural openings of the body breaks the wudu. As a matter of fact, this hadith right here is an essential hadith in siyam. It's essential because we don't have many hadith explaining things passing natural openings. This one is a very important one. But it also, aside from siyam, it shows us that every act has a limit, a boundary. where we could be taking things too far. Tamam. And we've seen this. We know of some ulama, maybe even some sahaba and tabi'een that would make wudu to their shoulders. Now, one might say this is an exaggeration. One might say this is extra ibadah and it's allowed. The arguments are plenty. But we need to remember that there is a bare minimum, because that's actually more important than everything else. And we're going to stop here, inshallah. It's our first class back. And in our next class, we're going to start with the complete detail of madmada and istinshaq in the Shafi'i school and in all 4 schools bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Tamam. And the idea there is that we want to identify all of the sifat of madmada and istinshaq. This is going to be very important because I'm going to introduce you to more details on al-akhdh bi aqall ma qil and al-khuruj min al-khilaf, and show how the 4 schools addressed issues of al-khuruj min al-khilaf, inshallah ta'ala. Hadir akhi al-habib, inshallah ta'ala, I'll do so immediately, bi'idhnillah. So alhamdulillah, we're back, and inshallah we'll be consistent in us being back bi'idhnillah. أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يرزقنا علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.